Yo, the Leo trio is back, except Gabe is not here yet, but he did let me know he's just running a little late. We will have Gabe. It's going to be an awesome stream tonight, you guys. I hope you're ready. Coming out the gate with a big super chat from Rachel. Thank you so much for the support. Always consistent. Appreciate you, Rachel Sparks. So, me and Dylan have been looking at this text called the Oera Linda. Dylan for a lot longer than me, but we've been deep diving it this week and pretty excited to talk about it. I think the important preface to make here is that this is a text that's been called a forgery by the mainstream. And so that is something to bear in mind. It's also the type of thing they would say about any kind of text that might actually reveal something useful or good to know about our history. Regardless of whether or not it's a forgery, there's very interesting stuff in there. And, you know, if it's a forgery or fiction, if you will, that doesn't take away the possibility of some kind of good allegory about it. Now, the next caveat is the boot boys, the NAZIs, are said to have been really into this work. I think that might be a brush that is painted with to keep eyes away from it, as many things are, you know, you go searching for it, you'll find stuff about like, beware reasonable fascists and things like that. So you guys know us. We're not coming at you through the lens of fascism. We're all about truth, love, and freedom, baby. But we also want to explore this very interesting and apparently controversial work. So Dylan, I'm going to bat it over to you to introduce the Oera Linda. I know you've been more into the historicity of it than I have. Well, I've kind of just been combing through the text itself to catch up on what's in there. How are you doing, buddy?
Good. And I'm feeling aggressive because it's the end of Leo season. Now we got to deal with this other broad. And I just want to do a community service announcement. Put your shields up because the sun is square the moon right now, and the moon is square Saturn. Now, fortunately, it's sextant Venus, so that's good. But Saturn thing is not a good thing to be doing work right now. So put your shields up, everybody. And as far as the Oera Linda goes, like you said, it's not a forgery because somebody wrote it. So it's an actual text, and the gentleman that we interviewed, Jan Ott, has held it. And I put the link in my latest post on Substack that just came out as this went live. You can see him holding the text, and you can see it. So it's not a forgery in the sense that it's not real or it's like, you know, made at a certain point. It came into being in the 1860s, 1871, somewhere around there. And the controversy surrounding it may be what people are trying to pass it off as. And so that is like, are we looking at the story behind it is essentially what I think might be controversial because it's claiming a lot of things. And, you know, it could be real. It could be fan fiction. It could be, you know, whatever it is, somebody created an alphabet, which is impressive. And somebody wrote a book, a manuscript or a codex in that alphabet. That's cool no matter what. Like, that's an awesome feat for anyone who's ever written anything. You have to be a special type of person to be able to do that. So I think the only thing that I'm interested in with my work is why people kept asking me if I had read it whenever, like, I do a podcast and I'm talking about ancient history, and it kept coming up over and over again. And so now we're going to address some things.
Yeah, man. So what Dylan just alluded to, we interviewed Jan Ott. He's the guy you see here on the screen. That's going to be an upcoming Interverse episode. But due to the nature of that conversation being a bit more high level in the subject matter and the minutia of what we were getting into, I thought we really need to crack this baby open for the listeners who aren't exposed to it yet. We need to start from the ground up so that whenever they come to that conversation, that episode, things will be more clear and it'll be more interesting for them. So this is Jan right here. Interesting guy. He happens to practically share a name with the first guy that translated the Oera Linda in like 1876, which is weird. The original translator was Jan Atema, and this guy's name is actually Jan Ott. I found that cool. So you can see these links here, oeralinda.org. That's his website. The Oera Linda wiki is another part of his situation, wiki.oeralinda.org. Good place to actually read the text with, comparative notes, comparative translations. The interesting thing about Jan Ott is that he has retranslated it just recently. So that's the version we're going to be working off of for this conversation. Now, to back it up, here's the Jan Atema from 1872. And next to him, I have a sample of the text itself. So this is a wide-ranging manuscript that covers a lot of ground historically in terms of the story that it has to tell. And we'll see, if we all have fun with this and we want to go further. Sorry, Braden, we're wearing sleeves. My sleeveless shirts are in the laundry. I'm paying for it. It's hot. That's hilarious. All right. But we're gonna talk about the mythological primal history aspect of the Oera Linda and the way far back history that is alleges to be right after the flood, like 2200 BC, around that range. And we'll explore this alphabet. We're gonna crack this thing open. We got a lot to talk about, so I don't want to waste too much time. I want to get us right into it. I see a lot of our listeners are here. Thanks for being here, guys. Showing up promptly on time. I know this is an exciting one. So Dylan, here we have it. This is what the alphabet looks like for the Oera Linda. And as you guys can see, where my cursor is at, we have this 6-spoked wheel symbol. We're going to break this down a lot. We're going to explore this a lot. But the letters of this script are all composed of segments of this 6-spoked wheel, which, as far as creating an alphabet goes, that's really interesting, especially how much similarity there appears to be to Old English. I like that a lot. So I've got these links built into my PowerPoint where we're going to be able to quickly jump to the page in the wiki that will tell us about the thing we're seeing on the screen. And that's going to allow me to do some reading of what the translation of the Oera Linda has to say. Now, I'm not going to be going in order in terms of the order that the manuscript is in, but we are going to approach it from a somewhat chronological order. And Dylan, just feel free to jump in at any point as I'm going over this. I'm kind of in presentation mode. So
great. Two things I want to start off with, because if you're in presentation mode, we might miss this. So there's two. So this land is described as two different names of what it's a potential flooding or the it's kind of similar to Atlantis, but all time is reckoned by the sinking of this, right, and the catastrophes that were happening. Now, in some parts of the text, it's called Atland, Atland, but that's what the seafarers called it, allegedly, in the context of the Oera Linda book, whereas the Frisians called it Aldland, which is Aldland. And that's why when I asked Jan about it, he said it means old land. So even though it's very similar to Atlantis and the reckoning of time based on its sinking is Atlantis, it's not. It's like the old land, like, and I broached that subject, is it Doggerland? What is it? And but I just wanted to bring that up. And then regarding that, we have to address this because there's going to be conspiracy minded people who read this. And we went into that sun wheel, right? And I just want everybody to know we are acknowledging this now. Yes, it is 33, right? You'll see that, right? So it's 33 mirrored from each other. So I want to say to everybody, don't freak out when you say, oh, you guys are doing this. It's sun worship, devil worship, whatever. It's admittedly a symbol of Jesus Christ or the sun, whatever you want to call it. There, I address it.
I'm glad you did. I don't really have a mind for but what will the trolls say? But There's
I
a
do, 'cause
lot
I
baked
get it.
into this, dude. There's so much baked into this symbol, and we'll explore that. But first, I want to just read the page from the Oera Linda that talks about what we're looking at here. So if you see on the bottom right of the slide, 3 wheels, and there are 6 letters, 1 letter in each segment of it. Kind of reminds me of the Soter thing, right? And also about Atland or Altland, Old Land. If this is just an if, conjecturally, if there is truth to this story, we may be looking at where the name Atlantis came from. You know, it could be the same thing if there is such a place, such a thing. And it
Because
could
we
be
know
that
the
these
Greeks
stories of
steal
Atlantis have
everything.
been exaggerated over time and made into a bigger thing than they were, or maybe there was a lot going on and it sank. Who knows?
Yeah, and I just want to highlight how that's possible, is because the Greeks take everything and revamp it as though it originated with them somehow. So, I mean, if there was a culture that was kind of like Leonine and like had to be the center of the attention, it's definitely the Greek.
So as you see these 3 wheels, the first wheel says Wralda around the outside. The next one is translated to mean the potential, and the third wheel is meaning the beginning. And to read from the text, it says, depicted above are the signs of the Yule, which is the primary symbol of Wralda and of the potential or the beginning from which came time, the bearer, who must conduct the Yule in its circuit forever. From it, Freya made the stand script that she used for her texts, which is a text, I think, just without a T at the end. And when she was honored mother, Festa used it to make the continuous run script. So the difference between stand script and run script is the stand script is what we see on the screen here, and the run script. So the stand script is maybe more for like carving and engraving. The run script is a type of writing that is similar, but allows them to write without taking the quill or the pen off the page, sort of like cursive. It is therefore well justified that we celebrate the Yule every year. It is fitting for us to give eternal thanks to Wralda for imbuing our ancestors so deeply with his spirit. In her time, Finda also designed a script, but it was so pompous and full of curls and flourishes that her descendants soon lost its meaning. They later learned our script, specifically the Finns, the Tyrians or Surians, and the Greeks, but they were not well aware that it was based on the Yule, and therefore must always be written sunwise. They also wanted their writing to be illegible to other people, as they always have secrets. Thus, they went very much astray, so much so that the children could barely read the writings of their elders, whereas we can read our most ancient scriptures just as easily as those that were written yesterday. So there's a lot in there that we got to introduce as we get to it, but Wralda is the chief, the chief god, the top god, or the source, more than a god, more than an individual or a character. It's like source. And it's like the wheel of time, the wheel of fortune. Then also we had Freya brought up and Finda. These are 2 kind of like opposing Eve characters in a lot of ways. We'll find out more about them as we go. But what's immediately interesting to me about Oera Linda is the assertion that is made in this text that Wralda imbued the original people, and I could be getting the paraphrasing wrong, but the original people had a language that was perfect to sound matching meaning. And because of that, if people tried to lie or be dishonest in that original language, they couldn't do it without stuttering or stammering or having trouble. And so later deceitful men, aka the priest classes, created new languages that they could cipher and encode and conceal through. Booty Yoga nails it. Wralda sounds like world. I do think that is in there.
I've got something to say about that. When you're done.
No, go for it. It's a great time.
Okay. Well, what I was going to address is you have the 2, right? It's almost like standard versus runic, right? Or like if you remove that S or just recognize that the S and T interchange, so it's sand, you're going to have more of like a holy, which would be like the official like language of the priest, but then the runo implies like whispers and secret. So it's like there's like an official kind of symbolism or a secret, and it's always going to be like the vulgar and the sacred. But in terms of Wralda, if you look at it in reverse, like first of all, it says Wralda is God, which is good, and she who is alone. It's a guy, sorry, a masculine archetype, who alone is eternal and good, right? Made the beginning, commenced time. Well, that's the eternal fire, right? Huesh, which we've talked about this. Hues, right? In Greek, it looks like upsilon, upsilon, eta, sigma, right? It's the old monogram of Bacchus. And if you look at Wralda in reverse, it would be Atland if you drop the W, which is the root of Atland, right? And
which that's allowing for the R to N switch that is a little more subtle or not as known about.
So that would look like BR or B Nun Sophie. It's kind of like a Vav. I fucked that up a little bit.
Oh yeah, like Ben and Bar, both meaning sun.
Yes. But if you look at the bones of the words, it's just B and BR. So for those who want to look at it, Bet, Nun Sophie, Bet, Resh. Okay. Now,
I also think that Yule sounds like wheel. Like wheel could be derivative of that.
Yeah, and it's spelled in the text. It's spelled like that. Yule, Juul. Again, it's going back to the Yule tie. They even spell like it's the Yule feast or whatever, but they spell feast with Feest.
Well, and what wheel commences and ends at the Yule? What dies and is reborn? The sun.
It's baked into it, right? So like this is why I think it's good for people like you and me to look at it, is because we're not really emotionally attached to it at all. We can just show you this is the system. Whether it's real or not, it was invented by somebody. I guarantee you show me, I'll tell everybody here, you show me somebody who knows how to create an alphabet, and I'll show you somebody who was educated or raised by priests. Tolkien is no exception if you look at his history. Now, this is where it gets more interesting.
Super Catholic.
And Buddha Yoga noticed this right away, the correspondence to world. Well, we know that the R interchanges with L. A little less subtler, or a little more subtler, I should say, is that the W in older languages usually has a letter that signifies like a bunch of different letters based on its use. So it's actually UL or OL, which, going back to the priests of Amun, the Amunian radicals, this indeed signifies world, just like Buddha Yoga said. And this is what you see in the middle of the home oak or world tree. And back to that. Atland,
not to mention that Ul is taking us right back to Yule if it's UL.
Yep, it's all baked into it.
And you got L and all, just with a different way of sounding the vowel out.
Exactly. So this Atla could also be an anagram, which if you just rearrange it a little bit, is Alda, which is also going to pertain to old, but also alt, ALT. In the Americas, it signifies water, but on the old world, this is the root of things like altitude, signifying height. Hence, Wralda, he's a god, he's higher, he's in the heavens. So this stuff is just baked in, and I just wanted to bring that up because there's a lot in that name. I yield back.
Well, this is why I really like this setup where, I'm putting the pins up, you're knocking them down. I hadn't even thought of the Alda or Alta, like tall, high. That is definitely in there. Now, this is a slide where we can just see the script with aughts transliteration with it. Actually really like about this script that there are versions of the vowels for different accents without needing an extra mark on the vowel. So you can see that up here on this chart. And then the numbers, all the numbers just fit right in as well, including that pesky 3 giving us the 33. What's kind of cool too is how, if this is something like ancient and real that was actually used, the 4 in the style of 4, that is not as commonly written nowadays, it shows you maybe where that came from. Now, one aspect of this story that we should probably put into the mix as well is that the Oera Linda is claiming that most of this text was copied down off the walls of towns or burgs or citadels or fortresses, and that stuff has been wiped away or destroyed by conquerors, and it wasn't meant to be written down, but had to be preserved in a crisis or in an ongoing crisis, something like that. Do you want to make any comments on the script here?
No, I think you're doing a great job. It's just, I would also like to add, this is something you can do because if you expand the symbol and don't put it inside of and don't limit it into a circle, it's going to give you that flower of life, that lotus symbolism, that cube symbolism. And so the same thing people do with this, you can see it done with the hexagram and the Star of David, making the alphabet and the numbers based on that too. It's literally all the same system. It's just they put it in a circle here versus a square.
Yeah. And just as you were alluding to, here it is. You see the transition from nothing and then 1 circle and then 2 circles, giving you that Vesica Pisces. So this is the monad splitting, mirroring itself, the first act of creation. Through the first act of creation, we get the 3 in 1, this Triskeli Trinity pattern, born out of the Vesica, born out of the mother. So Father, Mother, Son, God, Goddess, Savior. And as you continue out the pattern through the 7 days of creation, if you will eventually be able to have a complete symbol of this Yule wheel. And if you go further with it, you get symbols like, if I back all the way up here, the flower of life. So they call the middle circle, or just one of these circles with 6 petals, the seed of life. And then, as Dylan was alluding to, if you were to geometrically connect points within this design, you'd be able to come up with all kinds of stuff. Metatron's cube, the Star of David.
That's why letters were called petala, petals. Petals of leaves, petals of flowers,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if this is an ancient way of creating letters, it definitely connects to the idea of petals as a word for letters. Whoa, I didn't thought
whoever made this is I'd be willing to bet my bank account they were undoubtedly connected to the priesthood, either a defect or they were just initiated into that system at a certain degree.
Do you think it's possible, just in terms of conjecture, that the priesthood is actually based off of these people and sort of like a stealing of what they had? Or do you think that it's what you just said, that the priest made all this?
I approach this like a prosecutor / poker player. And in poker, you have the turn and the river, right? You have the flop, you see everything and you can bet, you make your case, right? I would be 100% on board with that, but there's a lack of evidence to support that. And you can hide behind the guise of it was destroyed, and that's fine. That's your belief. But never in history has one person or one family been responsible for a whole nation's history. Artifacts are constantly dug up, whether those are forgery or real, that's a different conversation. But I will get on board with that when you have evidence to support it in the real world. And that's one of the reasons I am interested in this, is because when I started watching like Asha logos and stuff, they're using things and deities that are indigenous to Italy. And they haven't once in the text mentioned Italy. They don't once in the text mention Phoenicians. They don't once in the text mention Etrurians
Oh,
or
they mentioned
Turanians.
Phoenicians.
Oh, do they mention Phoenicians?
Oh yeah, we're gonna get into some Phoenician stuff tonight.
I know like they're talking about the Finns and stuff like that. And, you know, there's a lot of this, but they're specifically using things that, if you want me to get on board with it, I need to see artifacts from that part of the world with inscriptions that date older than what's in Italy. Like Minerva, for example.
Fair enough. He's a tough poker player. But here is the Megagar amulet, allegedly 6,000 years old. See the same design here. If it's real, this is from the ruins that are located in the Indus Valley so-called Indus Valley civilization from the Bronze Age in I believe this is in Pakistan. Meg or Mergar. I don't know exactly how they would pronounce that, but this is what maybe the oldest version of this Yule wheel that I could come across in my looking for it this week. Just pretty old, if that's real. But I mean, the dating, how they do dating for things is also suspect. But you know, you asked for artifacts. Here's an artifact. It doesn't prove anything about the Oera Linda per se, but it is interesting how far back this symbol goes. You know, we have this screenshot I grabbed from Asha Logos' series about the Oera Linda, where he's got pictures of the flower of life or the seed of life in a bunch of different places of the world. We'd have to do quite a bit of legwork to track down all the places where this symbol does show up worldwide. Asia, Europe, even I believe I know Egypt. It's got occurrences in Egypt. Have you come across this at all in your research into the Americas, the ancient peoples?
No, but I've seen it on a temple in Etruria. And so for those who are interested in that, I've got a Substack that explores all these old Etruscan sites, and you will see that symbol pretty much everywhere. So it's a culturally diffused symbol, no matter who created it. What I'm interested in is who has it first, who's got the oldest version of these things, because that will tell us history when all the texts we're reading are possibly forgery and stuff, right? But archaeology and all this stuff, it's another tool in the bag. So you have a bunch of different dots you can make. You're not just relying on language. You're not just relying on old text. You're not just relying on archaeology. You're not just relying on, you know, religious customs. It's the overall picture that will get developed by exploring every avenue. And that's why I'm passionate about this, because I know there's people with skill sets outside of what we talk about, that if they have this knowledge, when they look at stuff, they'll be able to spot it in other areas of cultural diffusion.
So I want to point out something interesting as a term of a language link that I didn't catch. Thank you to Old World Micmac, who appears to be familiar with the Oera Linda. The Mergar ruins that this amulet is found from, that name actually does sound a lot like Magyar, which is what the Oera Linda in some of the passages is referring to as the priests or the Magi.
It's like a people. It's like a culture whose king was a king priest named Magi or Magi.
Yeah, we're gonna get into them, but then we have to point out that this symbol is the ichthys, which is the symbol for Jesus Christ. We covered this in more depth in a pretty recent Vibrant. We got into this nicely, but
do you find any chance have that slide I sent?
Say again.
So the thing with this that people would say is, well, that has 8 spokes, right? Because it refers to the equinoxes. But I was just curious, do you have the actual slide from like that Merovingian sarcophagus with the actual, remember that I texted it to you this afternoon? It's okay if you don't. But the reason I wanted to bring that up is because before the ichthys, it's literally Jesus Christ. It's literally, it's a monogram. So you have the,
Here it is.
yeah. So that would be epsilon, sigma, omicron, epsilon, sigma. So that's the Jesus in Greek. And then you have the Christos. Or actually, this is the real way you would do it. The corrupted way is an I-S-T-O-S, right? So that's what you have. You put that together, and you've got the monogram of Christ or the sun symbol. So like this, you can find as early as the 4th century. So if you want to claim that this is a different sun symbol that's older, that these cultures are taking from you, the burden of proof is now on you to produce artifacts. And as destructive as anybody can be, you can't destroy everything, guys. There's always going to be tons of shit that makes it through the cracks. That's just a fact.
All right, I think we can move along, making good pace here. This is, I grabbed this from Dylan's Substack, where we can see how
that's from Logos, just so everyone knows. That's on his series, and it's all linked up in that. I definitely want to give him credit for this stuff.
Yeah, it's a really good 3-video series. We might be able to talk to Logos sometime in the future. So if Old Frisian is, this is all if, right? If Old Frisian is the more ancient system, this Yule system is more ancient, or if whoever created this manuscript was initiated into the priesthood system, either way, it has the consistency with the system, because they have this word loga, meaning flame, which is going to correspond to lux in Latin, the CG interchange, meaning light, the Greek logos, the ancient Irish or Druidic log, which is the fire, the god. Anything to add to that?
Yes. So that log in the Irish tradition is what they called down. It's like the spiritual fire of God, who to them was Isar, which is important because that's the plural of gods. The root of that would be the Gothic Isus, A-E-S-U-S, or As, right? Asgard. These are names for Odin, which is the sun. And so I just want to harp on that. This you can find in old inscriptions in Irish culture. So the way I see this, if this stuff is legit, what you're seeing is it's going around Europe, and it's exactly what you would see based on the ancient Italians colonizing and peopling Britain, and then those peopling Frisia and Scandinavia and Denmark, all those places via the ocean. And that's why I think you see this stuff, if it is in fact legitimate.
And then there's the other question, just an open question, that if there is this Altland or Old Land, is that an origin point for this system that maybe survivors jumped over to Italy from there? That's all beyond, the realm of proving, but that's possible as well.
Yeah, I mean, if there was this catastrophe that happened in like the first millennium, there ought to be some geological evidence of it. You know what I mean? So that's
especially if the water levels rose.
Yeah, and like the fires in Germany.
Look at the shape of Italy. If water levels rose, Italy could be like where the water didn't rise to, so it was a place to flee to, if that makes sense. That other surroundings would have been flooded.
Yeah, and Lou nailed it, right? His name in Irish should be really close to Lo. He nailed it. That is the Phoenician Etruscan. And something I wanted to talk to you about just real quick about that symbol. So what that...
Talking about Ogmios?
Yep. In that symbol, if it was just these 4, the quote unquote pagan holidays, right? Even though it's just the year, right? You'd have like the Yule, you'd have the mid dates between the seasons, whether it's like Ostera. Oh, sorry, not Ostera is the equinox, but you'd have like Beltane, right? You'd have the summer solstice, right? Or if we were going out, let's go around this way. You would have Beltane, you'd have Lunasa, you know, then you have Samhain before, you know, so these are important mid season dates, right? So the only thing that the Oera Linda, the sun sign, ignores, because it's implied, would be the equinox. And that's like really the only difference between that versus the 8-pointed star.
So the mainstream prime suspect for the author of the Oera Linda would be Francois Haverschmidt. And if that's true, it is a troubling possibility, you know, in terms of the intent behind the Oera Linda. I know, again, you've done more looking into what the case is against it than I have. But
to Jan's credit, Jan, the evidence supporting this is not that great either.
No,
so
it's
very
not.
important that but we would be remiss to not comment on it with our audience, you know, because this is like a very sharp group of people. They're going to look up this and they're going to see it was attributed to him. And they're going to be like, why didn't you bring up the fact that he's a member of the cult? And so we're just letting everybody know we see what's out there.
There's no cult. It's just a cool thing to do when you're getting your photo taken, dude. No big deal.
You conspiracy theorists. Well, you know, and I just want to acknowledge that, like, we know, guys, right? Like, you know, what's funny is I don't want to be
Christopher Walken's on here twice. It's just trying to make the list of.
Oh, this hand, it's hidden. Why?
So yeah, you know, screenshot that to show your mom and dad when Thanksgiving dinner comes around. Everybody, thank you. Okay, so now we can get into some more of the text itself, and you feel free to comment, jump in anytime. The first pages of this text appear to be written by whoever inherited it. So I'm just going to read it's not very long. It opens with, "My dear heirs, for our beloved ancestors' sake, and for the sake of our precious freedom, 1,000 times I bid you, dearest, never to let the eyes of a monk come upon these writings. They utter sweet words, but they subtly distort all that concerns us Freyas. To gain rich endowments, they collaborate with the puppet kings. These know that we are their greatest enemies because we dare speak to their people of freedom, justice, and the obligations of nobility. Therefore, they make certain to obliterate all traces of our ancestral heritage and what is left of our morals. My dear ones, I have visited their palace. If Wralda allows, and if we fail to make ourselves strong, they will exterminate us all." So this right here is what made me immediately like turn my head like, hey, what's going on in this book? The whole never let the eyes of a monk come upon these writings. That's what I'd be telling my folks if I had, you know, some secrets or I had some truth.
Absolutely. Like, again, I understand, like, if this were legitimate, everything about it would make sense in that regard. However, one group of people, like a small family, would never be able to guard the history of an entire people. Culture doesn't work that way. Civilization doesn't work that way. It's this massive organism, and you could stomp out one part of it and there's still going to be tons making it everywhere else, you know? And that's one of the things we see in Italy is a lot of authentic artifacts were destroyed because they already had the crucified Savior in Italy. They already had use of the cross. They already had use of all these things that the church hijacked. So what they had to do is all the stuff that they couldn't destroy, they had to co-opt, right? the crucified Savior, Deus Soli, the Black Bambino, etc. So, you know, that's where I want to see more of that with the subject matter of these texts.
Yeah, I'd be interested to look into some of the buried temples like Göbekli Tepe, if there can be any connections made to things described in the Oera Linda, because the idea here again is that the reason one copy of this manuscript existed would have to do with the people not being encouraged or prone to writing things, but that it was kept on the edifices of towns and burgs. The thing is, once people have a good spot for a settlement, they're not going to just, it's not just going to like disappear overnight. That's really rare, you know, for it to be totally buried and covered up. What happens is people build on top of. So maybe one of these days, one of these underground tunnel systems somewhere might turn up like some writing on a wall that resembles the script in the Oera Linda, and then that would do it. Like if we could find something like that, it would change the game in terms of how we looked at this text.
Exactly. And my thing is like, I'm not trying to contradict anybody. I just go where the evidence goes. And I want people, you know, when it comes down to showing what, you know, we're playing a high stakes poker game. When it's time to show your hand to see who's going to take the pot down, we're going to see who's playing with what hand. And I don't want to see anybody calling my raises with 7-3 off suit, you know? But look at also the Leaning Tower of Pisa. These megalithic structures, they sink into the earth, right? Because all this stuff that's going on, the earth is like alive, right? Whether it's water going underneath it, whatever, whether it's drying up, they'll sink into the earth and become uninhabitable. So they have to like destroy them. You know, there's all kinds of reasons, especially in Italy. You look at, they would literally ritually destroy old towns and then ritually build them back up and found them. You know what I mean? So like when it was time and it's like it's dilapidated and it needs to go, they would destroy it and put it on a location and then bury over it with, and then like it was a whole, you know, spiritual religious type of ceremony.
So the author of the copy of the Oera Linda that we have says to his descendants, he must guard the books with these books with body and soul. He refers to the flood being recent when this is written. Actually, there appear to be two authors in the first two passages here. One who did a recopying in 803, and then another doing a copying in 1256 AD. But essentially, the idea is that this stuff was copied down, or at least parts of this text are as old as when the last flood was. That's another interesting part of this Oera Linda that is definitely big in the esoteric side of the priestcraft, that the flood isn't a one and done thing, the deluge, but that it's a cyclical thing that does repeat over time.
That was one of the things that was kind of confusing to me as well, is like the way it's set up. The 1256 AD one from Hito over to Linda is before the one written by Lico over to Lindo. So that was a little confusing. So, but you know, it's good that you differentiate between the 500, 600 years difference, you know, like that's pretty intense, people. Like you got to remember that amount of time. How do I put this in perspective?
How many times would the Gitas be recopied in 600 years? Would that be 6,000 I mean, 60 times that they'd be copied, or?
Well, no, in India they have to do it every 10 years.
Yeah, in India, every 10 years they had to recopy stuff.
Because the paper rots. Well, for Britain, the British people of the 17th century could no longer understand the British tongue from like Beowulf, like from like the days of Chaucer in the 14th century. Literally 300 years is like look, it's like us trying to read the cursive of our founding fathers. It's really intense, you know, it's just different. So language changes really quick. So that's very important to be mindful of.
Yeah, if we're talking about antiquity this great. And that also could be part of the advantage of having a strict system of letters and language, the way is outlined here. Maybe there's something, maybe instead of there being some kind of intrinsic truth to the letters and sounds and words and meanings being given by God, so to speak, maybe there's a dependability in the system that allows it to be less changeable over time. You know, we do see that with quote unquote dead languages that those aren't changing. Latin hasn't changed in the last 600 years.
That's why Sanskrit remained perfect, right? It was never a common language, just like Hebrew.
So here we have another part of the text we're going to look at. This is the right side. You see the original manuscript. Let's see, what do I want to read out of this part? So we're getting into the primal history of the folk, the sort of mythical origin story, cosmogony aspect. Waiting for my link to open up. Here we go.
Volk and folk, right? Volkswagen.
Exactly. So this is saying it was Freya's day, 7 times 7 years since Festa had been ordained as Folk's mother, according to the will of Freya or Freya. So that's evidently Freya of the Norse mythology. I think what was interesting to me about this is this Festa character being like the high priestess of a sort. Compare that to the Vesta or Hestia, you know, the keepers of the flame, the possibly being, according to Jan Ott, this is also possibly the origin of Fasta or Fosetta from the Germanic tradition, one that I don't know a lot about. And the other thing that is interesting here is how Freya is calling to the high priestess from her watch star. That gives me big vibes of like watchers, the idea of watchers. And, you know, I think that this may be, you know, whatever this is talking about, whatever, I know maybe I'm just going to stop giving the disclaimer of, is it real? Is it not? So we're going to just move from we're going to talk about this from what it would mean if it was real, generally speaking.
And real quick, I would ask somebody from the
disclaimer.
Netherlands, like you see Medeisplik, right? That's not quite like, is that what is modern day Medemblik, Medemblik, which is in the Netherlands? Like that's another thing, is like a lot of the locations in this script, you can't get any corroboration of them anywhere else in any historical record.
Well, a lot of the ones I tracked down usually based on what Jan asserted it to be linked to. I do have some stuff in here that can point us to real places, and some of the symbolism links or linguistic links are there too. So they're that's not 100% true is what I'd say. I think some of this can
okay.
Be
so when in history was Scandinavia called Skoonland? Schoonland. Like, are they just spelling? Like, so that's like the type of things that I'm saying. Like when, like, if I don't want to hear an explanation, I want to see like an inscription. I want to see somewhere, some people some culture referring to Scandinavia as Skoonland, and what that dates to. I don't care about Middle Ages, right? I want to see this before the Common Era, when this stuff would have been written. You know what I mean? That's where I'm at. That's why I'm like, that's my mentality from this stuff.
I think if we maybe just chat, Gabe,
we've started. You can join now.
We'll see if he jumps in. I know the chat's really missing him. He brings the fun. I'll try to be more fun for Gabe's sake. Okay. So, oh man, I kind of want to just go deep into what the text says. Hopefully that's what people are here for. That's what I'm here for. So just got to get this link open. All right. Wralda, who is wholly good and eternal, created the potential. Then came time, and time wrought all things, even the very earth herself. Earth bore all grasses, herbs, and trees, and cherished creatures and all dreaded creatures. All that is good and dear she brought forth by day. All that is evil and fearsome she brought forth by night. After the 12th Yule feast, she bore 3 girls. Lida or Lydia was of glowing hot, Finda of hot, and Freya of warm substance. So it's like extreme heat, moderate heat, low heat. Upon their birth, Wralda fed them with his breath, so that mankind should be bound to him. Soon after they matured, they began to find delight and fulfillment in their dreams. Wralda's odd, it worked. Gabe's here.
Hey, are you reading from a slide that, because I don't think that what you're reading from is currently on screen. But
no, I didn't want to put just a wall of text on screen. I'm reading
okay.
from the Oera Linda itself.
Okay.
From this section.
Woo!
Good to see you, brothers.
Welcome, buddy.
So let me finish up this part. Wralda's odd is said to have entered into Lydia, Finda, and Freya. And so each bore 12 sons and 12 daughters, twins each Yuletide. Of these, all mankind has come. So this is a very similar type of creation myth, but just in a condensed form. And so some of Jan Ott's notes about it, he points out that odd, which again, Odin has got that same root, odd, OD, that Wralda's odd entered into these 3 daughters that allowed them to bear children. He says, odd is apparently a term related to fertilization, possibly related to the Middle Dutch hoden, which is a testicle, or odiver, or odivar, which is a stork associated with the delivery of babies. Also, the Greek word odis can mean birth. Luther's Bible, Martin Luther, used odum for the word referring to God's life-giving breath he breathes into Adam. But Wralda had already fed Earth's daughters with his breath, Adama, when they were born. So I'd have to look up into the actual Oera Linda manuscript, but I think that it's using the word Adama or Adama for the breath of Wralda going into these.
Adonis,
Adonis.
Adonai, my lord.
In the
Also,
Prose Edda
Yod.
by Snorri Sturluson, Oder or Other is mentioned as Freya's husband and father of 2 daughters. So very interesting. Can
we talk about this picture? Because you can't expect me to. I'm like wriggling in my seat here.
Oh yeah, bud. There's a lot to talk about with this picture.
Who's that? Hit it.
Who are we looking at? I'll let you go first, then, and we'll talk about it more.
Well, so you that constant theme of reckoning the year. Well, which royal star reckons that year? That would be Fomalhaut, the fish's mouth, right? That is the southern fish that Aquarius pours his urn into. So going back to the Yule, right? What is Aquarius? Jan Ueri. It's all there.
You know what I'm seeing? I'm wondering, just recently learned about the word for the Ukrainian language is in bird speak. Its term is nightingale. And here I see the orb of Urania, a sphere or an egg in one hand, the left hand, which would be your right brain. So that would be the night. And then I see a 10-gallon bucket. I see the night 10 gal
Which is kind of like the cornucopia, right? Horn.
Nice, yes.
I see the age of Aquarius finishing off the age of Pisces.
Right on, yeah, buddy.
He's got a bucket, and he's standing on a fish.
Right, and the bucket could even be 180 over there with Krator, the sacred chalice vessel cup.
So there's here is a decent example of the possibility that the 8-spoke and the 6-spoke could have some interchangeability to it. Now, obviously, like somebody's drawing and engraving in some old grimoire isn't evidence of something, neither is a more modern statue, but this is the same Crodo-Germanic deity, one that I haven't really heard of, but definitely a Saturn, Kronos type archetype. We could get into it a little more. I have a link to the wiki page about Crodo, said to be similar to the Roman god Saturn. Modern historians characterize the figure of Crodo as a fake. Who knows why that would be? The first illustration that I had up is said to have come from, or is from a book that is dated to 1492. So if this is the age of Aquarius stepping on the age of Pisces, that's a pretty damn long time ago to be putting that idea out into the zeitgeist.
Well, I got to support something that Gabe brought up about the cup of salvation and sin. So if you look at the bones of Crodo, you got the he, you've got the rho, and that D and T interchange, which interchanges with S, right? Listen, mistletoe. We don't say mistletoe. We don't say listen. We say epistles, not epistles, right? Well, this is the sacred name of Christ. You will see it on the breast of the Pope on one of the versions of the Latin Vulgate in the title page. And you will also see under it the sign of Libra, which is the sun crossing over the autumnal equinox, or is being crucified, which is at the same time they're pressing wine in the same part of the region of the sky that Gabe was talking about, crater.
So Gabe, since you're here and we're all so stoked about it, the chat was literally chanting, Gabe, Gabe, Gabe. I don't know. We did that. I don't know if you're listening to the stream, but we did that, and then boom, you popped in. It was within moments of me beginning the chant. Okay. So
I was not listening at all. I have been on high grade synchronicity for days, so it just makes perfect sense.
Well, I know that this Oera Linda stuff is a little newer for you as well. Dylan's looked at it the longest, most scrutinizing way, but do you have some thoughts to lead in with in terms of your impressions on it thus far?
Well, yes. As soon as I heard that was what we were talking about, the 6-spoke wheel comes out. It explodes into my consciousness in a massive way. I'm very much. I had just the day before deciphered the flower of life out of the what's that fella's name? Anthony Oliver.
That's ridiculous. Richmond, north of Richmond, psyop.
Yes. So he pulls Psalms 37. 37 is the Mason-Dixon line. He's talking about Richmond, north of Richmond. He's double toxifying masculinity with those lyrics.
Doesn't he like have bitch tits and stuff and talking about cultural Marxism?
Big time. Rich man, north of rich man, double toxifying the man, all this man bullshit. But what gets me
is such a conservative hero. Why does he get so much media coverage from the left?
Well, his the Bible verse that he read from actually draws a flower of life. It's talking about put the sword and you pivot and you swing the sword, and then you cut away the straight lines and you got the ribs and the curvature, and then you're and then in the end it literally says and then you incinerate the flowers into smoke. So it's so spell-tastic, it's profound. But what gets me is the 6-spoked wheel that we're looking at here, right? This is going to be Tifereth. And over his shoulder, while he's singing into everybody's heart chakra, is a tree fort. Tree fort is an anagram for Tifereth. He is literally hitting us in the heart chakra, as far as I can tell, on the tree of life.
And Tifereth is strength and masculinity. Or beauty and masculinity, my bad. Beauty and masculinity.
Right. And it's in a tree fort, which is a battle call. It's a bat box. What is it? Hex 6? Yes.
L for Latin, G for Greek.
Right. And just last week, I found this cipher in our countdown. Sixes are loyalists. They're in this Tifereth, come together mambo jumbo.
The Enneagram, you're referring to the Enneagram.
Yes, the
People who don't
Enneagram.
know.
Yes, the loyalists with the shadow of fear. Fight for threat to one's hero. Sixes, fight for a threat to one's hero is a battle call that is hiding inside of our numbers. And it just makes perfect sense that I decipher that when he's busting out his Tifereth magical mumbo jumbo with his little song that I loved. I absolutely loved his song. But we're looking at country music during a terrifying attack on the heart chakra of America. Guess what? Hawaii lines up perfectly with the Las Vegas shooting. It all lines up. It's all the same harmonics and the same frequency. So
this classic weaponized counterculture hits you right in the heart. You know, you think, oh, finally our people, they're rising up. But then you got to take a double take and go, yo, this dude was a 0 to hero in a day. That doesn't happen. Not on today's internet. That's some controlled opposition, just for sure. So you got to look at it sideways at that point.
You know, I love the feels. I love the feels, and I drank them in. It was like a fresh water in the desert. It was so good. But then I'm thinking to myself, like analytically, feeling is leisure. Feeling is leisure. And so his opening line about I've been working hard all day, you know, he just cornered every other psychological option you have. If you've been working hard all day, well, now we are in leisure, and leisure is love. It is your heart affiliation center. He just honed right into Tifereth, and this is just art craft. It's beautiful, but at the same time, it's dangerous. You know, with the bat L cry.
What was he doing all day?
Lamenting.
Hey, Mario said something good a while back too, because like you remember before like they had all these like silly ass things like Uranus and Neptune in the zodiac. Aquarius was ruled by Saturn, right? So that's interesting too, because who else? What other sign does he exalt in? Libra, which is that judgment.
Oh, right. And okay. Yep.
Going back to your creator stuff.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much. So I'm looking at time measure of art. I'm looking at hexameter, right? I'm looking at these all these different. Well, it turns out artistically there is a strong precedent for hexameter in particular to be weaponized, and with a specific flavor of intention when you use this numerological frequency. We'll just say the 6 of it all. And that is to expose the vulnerability of the person you're engaging. That's to take their private side, their heart, and turn it and invert it into the public. So it's exposed for everybody so you're transparent. There's no privacy anymore. Your data is clear and safe and effective. 15 man nut cities. All right, rant done.
I'm taking us back to Wralda. Let's see here. I'd like to read the teachings of Wralda section from the Oera Linda.
Did you put together why there's like a dash between it? That's something we should have asked Jan, because I know they do that with several names, and there's different, like WR must mean something because it's spelled for the audience in the text. It's
yeah, they put that period, right?
It's like WR Alda, right? And so Minerva is spelled like this, Erva. And so I already forgot, because we'll have to see what Jan introduced. But this like allegedly translates to my life or my prosperity. There's something, I forget what it was, my something. So I wonder what this is, my, I don't know.
But I don't know, man, because I'm looking at pages from the manuscript right now, and it's not dashed or spaced, at least all the time. Maybe it's in there. Maybe it sometimes is. But
yeah, I'm looking at the 1876 version or whatever that's on the internet. So who the hell knows?
Oh, yeah, the Jan Atma. You want to look at the Jan At version.
Right, but Jan Atma's version is the one that's got all these claims around it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean?
Like
yeah,
I appreciate like
that came out
the one that I would like to go with is definitely Jan At, but just for the sake of like all the questions that I've been getting over the past year about it, it's referring to that one.
So I wanted to point out something funny though about Crodo here, the Germanic Kronos.
Or Frodo.
I know it sounds like Frodo. He's standing on a perch. That's the type of fish that he's standing on.
It's puntastic, man. These Puntiest.
Puntiest. So there's not a lot to the teaching.
Can I give you guys some feedback? You guys got to explain this stuff because, like, I have to watch something that Gabe's on like 3 times because Gabe always drops these amazing knowledges, or these little nuggets, but he doesn't ever elaborate. And what you just said is hilarious, but it took me a little bit to get it. Explain, you know what I mean? Gabe gets it right away because he's with it. I'm like the special kid. I'm like, I rolled up here on the short bus, motherfuckers. You got to slow it down.
Well, did you catch his 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 6 fight 4 threat to 1's hero? Or 0? I didn't put the 0 in there. That's the kind of thinking that we got Gabe on the team for.
Yeah, man.
Out of the box thinking.
Yeah, but explain that pun. Explain the pun for the people.
Yes. Puntiest. Like I've been thinking about
I thought you were saying church, like perch, church. He's standing on the church.
No, he's standing on a fish called a perch. The fish a perch is a type of fish, and a perch is something you stand on. It's hilarious.
Gotcha. So I didn't even. So there you go. I'm
but the whole thing about the
mute
priest,
myself.
The whole thing about the priesthood is that they are pun theists. As Gabe pointed out, pantheists, puntheists, it's all in the puns. That's where you got to read between the lines with this stuff because that's where the secret message is to the initiate passing to other initiates. Big time.
Yeah, man. And it's even, we did this the other day where we were talking about the fish hat is capiche, right? Capiche. And so it's asking if you understand. I love it. But yeah, I had a metaphor on my mind just yesterday about this Pun-Theism. Let's take a bunch of boats, maybe 5 or 6 boats, and each boat rhymes with the boat next to it. So they're all a rhyme. Like let's use the word letter or later or I don't know, ladder, a ladder, all these things. Even ludicrous, let's put them all in a boat. And then we're going to say the same word with the same amount of force to all the boats. But the boat that everybody thinks we're talking about with that word, that has that word spelled perfectly, is going to be pushed further by the wind of the sound that we're making with the intention we're trying to aim for. But here's the thing. All the other boats that were not intended when we use the word, they also get nudged. They also get pushed a little bit adrift into the potentiality field. And when you look back and you add up the distance that the word that they used that you thought they meant, how good was its distance? How far did that boat get? Well, when you add it up against some of the other boats, another image starts to come to mind. And that is that nebulous realm of this pun theology, where you realize they're talking around the truth. And all these other ships are getting way further mileage out of the words that they're using. And the word that everybody else attached to is kind of the short bus.
Gabe, you need to clip that. But real talk, you could make a children's book with that story to make it learning language fun. Don't forget what you just said. I'm serious. I'm not joking.
Isn't that a good
111? In the stream. Somebody flip it for Gabe.
If I could draw better than stick figures, I would make my own books like that. Literally simplify it for children because a lot of this stuff is really enjoyable to learn. It's just you have to have a reason. And if you don't have a reason to learn this stuff, then you don't give a shit about it,
I love it. Punky. Totally punky.
So the other thing about the satyr figure with the 6-spoked wheel, it is interesting how if you look at Saturn in a telescope, it's got the hexagram or hexagon symbol on its south pole. I've never looked, but that's the word on the street. But okay, now that this seems like a good time to do it, I wanted to read the actual sections or at least some of it, the teachings, the primal teachings about Wralda, because one of the things that Oera Linda asserts is that spirituality or knowledge of the divine is meant to be very simple and not a convoluted system of metaphors and allegories to, that you need an intermediary for or a translator for to help you understand and help you connect with the concept or the spirit of God. So in the whole script of the Oera Linda, the sections that are like the teachings, spiritually speaking, or about God is very brief. And it is entirely possible that we could read that right now. And if you guys bear with me, and we'll all be privy to what allegedly these ancient Frisians or even, post-Atlanteans or Atlanteans believed about the divine, about the creator. So the first section starts with, "Hail to all children of Freya who love that which is good. Through them, bliss shall come to earth. Learn and proclaim to the nations. Wralda is the most ancient or primordial. Over oldest is what is used for primordial. Over-oldest. For he created all things." So this version of Wralda is the most ancient and primordial. It actually has the dash between the WR and the ALDA. But the rest of this section doesn't have the dash. "Wralda is all in all, for he is eternal and infinite. Wralda is present everywhere, yet nowhere can he be seen. Therefore, his being is called spirit, and that we can see of him. All that we can see of him are the created beings that come and go again through his life, because from Wralda all things proceed, and to him they return. Out of Wralda comes both the beginning and the end. All things merge into him. Wralda is the only almighty being, because all other power is borrowed from him and returns to him. From Wralda, all forces are derived, and all forces return to him again. Therefore, he alone is the creative being, and nothing is created outside of him. Wralda set eternal principles, or Iwa, into all that was created, and there are no good commandments unless they be founded upon these principles." That sounds like a conscience. Although all is in Wralda, the wickedness of people is not of him. Wickedness comes from sloth, heedlessness, and stupidity. Therefore, it can harm the people, but never Wralda. Wralda is wisdom, and the Iwa that he established, or the laws, are the books from which we can learn. No wisdom can be found or gathered outside of them. People may see many things, but Wralda sees all things. People may learn many things, but Wralda knows all things. People may unlock many things, but to Wralda all is laid open. People are male and female, but Wralda creates both. People love and hate, but Wralda is only righteous. Therefore, Wralda alone is God, and there are no gods outside of him. With the circling of the Yule, that's the six-spoked wheel, Gabe, the Yule, all creation alters and changes, but only God is unchanging. Since Wralda is God, he cannot change, and since he endures, only he is being, and everything else emergence. So that's the first section of teachings, is straight up the doctrine of emanations. And, if you get into some like deep esoteric Hinduism, is exactly what they'll say about Krishna or Brahma. In my own personal deep psychedelic experiences, there you go. Yeah, it's a similar deal as what Dylan's holding up. My own
and these
like
are the
deep,
3 portions of the year.
my own personal deep like psychedelic experiences, the furthest I've gone into expanded consciousness states, dimethyltryptamine, etc. That is the sense that I've got every time, that there's one life. Everything is an aspect of one thing that's alive and is always alive. And even that sense of the cyclical nature of the wheel-like nature of it in my farthest out trips back when I used to experiment with those things, I would be up there or out there or whatever, and I'd have this sense like, oh shit, I know what day it is. I forgot what day it was. But not the day like Tuesday or Wednesday. I mean like the day of Brahm, or like the big part, like what big cycle we're in. Like, oh, we're repeating this one now. Like it's hard to explain, hard to bring it back down to here, but there is, something about the teachings that are described here, the simplicity of it that is accessible to human beings in, expanded consciousness states. And to that, that's one thing I like about this. All right, you guys want to take a swing?
No, I'm ready. Keep going, man.
Well, I got a couple things in my notes. For one, dollar, Wralda, dollar. And this is like the All Father. This is what greases the wheels. And that image is kind of like the one that you brought up, Dylan. Kind of reminds me.
Unintended, the wheel of time.
Yeah, it makes me think of a sand dollar. That little etch inside of a sand dollar looks so much like that. In the Dogon, allegedly, taught the laws of equivalent exchange. There's all this mythology about like doing trade with these sea peoples or whatever that is, which is kind of
DAG is fish, right? Dogon,
right.
Dagon.
Right. And so there's that point of exchange. Like the fact that the kid was standing on a fish is almost like telling you that at the shoreline, where these the tides become a tide. I've done really lovely rituals. Remember, I told you I had a aunt who was a witch, and we did a ritual when I was really young where we brought all of our a wish, like something that we wanted to give away, to put on the ocean at nighttime and to leave just outside of the reach of the waters, and then to turn your back and not look and just go home and just leave it there in the sand. Don't even watch the waters take it. And then you come back in the next morning and see if your wish worked. And I was like, wow, that's really just a cool little ritual, harnessing the natural cycles of the realm in order to fill what you want to see. Well, then I find out that the Dogon taught people that in the ancient days. And like, I thought it was just fun and games, but like that's high magics.
All right, we're ready for more, it looks like. So this is a bit longer of a section. The second part of the primal teachings. It's going to refer to Finda's folk, which, if this is based in any reality, this would actually be the Phoenicians. We're talking about the Finns, the Phoenicians here. The less honorable, supposedly, or the less, stuck to tradition and purity, if you will. So among Finda's folk, there are pretentious men who, by their over-inventiveness, have grown so vain as to convince themselves and their initiates that they are the best part of Wralda, that their mind is the best part of Wralda's spirit, and that Wralda can only think through the help of their brains. The notion that every creature is part of Wralda's infinite being, this they have acquired from us, but their false reasoning and unrestrained pride have caused them to stray from the righteous path. If their mind were like Wralda's spirit, then Wralda would be very stupid, instead of being sensible and wise, for their mind is constantly occupied with making appealing images, which they afterwards worship. So, there is an echo of the whole heal the world ideology. There's a word for it with a certain particular sect that wears a tiny hat. I'm blanking on the name of the word of the heal the world idea, but
imagine all the people
that that Wralda can only think through them, or that God can only think through them. This is, if there was a way that this could get corrupted, that's a good first step, for it to be corrupted, like the sort of hubris idea of that we're the image of God, or that then, the next step is like that we're God, or that we're gods, and how That goes to dark places, but I'll continue.
Well, real quick though, real quick. Yeah. Oh, unless Gabe wanted to go, because it pertains to the origin.
After you.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to say, in the book, it says after the 12th Yule feast, right? She brought forth 3 maidens, right? So these 3 maidens are the triplicity of the sun. Lida out of fierce heat, Finda out of strong heat, Freya out of moderate heat, right? So Finda was yellow. And according to Sames, Eilert Sames, in his Antiquities of Britain, the Phoenicians' word for yellow or saffron was Celta, which is why they called the Celts Celti, because they had yellow hair. And it said it was like the mane of a horse. And you'll see that horse on the sun symbolism as well, with all these coins like Cuno Bellinus. Basically, she is kind of like the summer sun, right? Her characteristics are regal, right? She's treacherous. She's into violence. She's vain. She's full of herself, you know?
We'll get into that a little more in depth, because I want to go through those passages as well. And I'm glad you brought that up though. And then somebody in the chat, thank you, Orphic Omelet. The Hebrew phrase for heal the world because the world is broken is tikkun olam. And, you know, that idea the world is broken and needs healing is where we get the dark simulation theory, Gnosticism, demiurge bullshit eventually. You know what, though?
And remember that
okay,
OL,
if people want
the OL, home oak, olam.
It's there. That's there. Now, I'm not like judging people who are in the cave mentality. I'm in the matrix. I gotta break free. Don't go into the light. The world is a trap. It's a illusion factory, whatever. You know, I love you people. It's okay if you think that way. I did have a tuning session with somebody this week who said that our talking about that stuff got her out of the cave mentality, the exit the cave, world is a prison mentality, and that it really turned her life in a positive direction to get out of that. Like, a lot of things started going better for her to change that belief. You know, take it how you will. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm not victimizing you for your belief in that, but it's you get to choose what you believe in. The Cave of Brahm, winter solstice, the Yule feast.
Right. And, you know, I'm thinking about the fact that Yule is kind of in the word yellow, right? And also, I'm pretty sure the Yule is that is the name of the founder of Yale. And the Yule is a type of a goat, a very choice sacrificial goat, and is found on the devil card number 15 again, having a strong 6 affiliation to this word, the Yule goat.
And then there's Iulus, son of Ennead, Ennius, I should say, from the Trojan Wars, right? And according to the guy who compiled the Poetic Eddas, right, or whatever they're called, the Prose Eddas from Iceland, Iulus, right? That's where the Yuli tribe comes from. Well, in Norse, it's Vidar or Vitar. It's the same dude. And son of Odin. So Ennius is Odin.
Wow. Okay.
On Eus.
Yes. So this is earlier when we mentioned this over eldest, you know, like already born. Somebody mentioned that even the word like NATO in Italian, doesn't that mean already born? NATO?
Yeah, because natal charts, right?
Yes. So already born and NATO. Well, NATO is called Wotan in Europe. They reversed the whole word. And so Wotan is the North Atlantic Treaty. And this is like the Atlanteans. They're very specific about that A. They tried to let China in at the table, and they're like, they're not in the Atlantic. They can't be at this table. So it's very regionally exact and very specific. They're being impeccable at a very high level.
Dude, you're right. They call it Otan.
It's called Otan. Now look up Carl Jung's writing on the Wild Hunt. This guy painted a painting of Hitler with the mustache riding on horseback on a wild hunt the year Hitler was born. And then they propagandized him with his little mustachio caterpillar, the caterpillar, you're initiated. I smell something cooking here. And they propagandized him to look like Woden. And so
me and Mr. Mustache and the Boot Boys had a lot of, were made to be connected to this Oera Linda big time as a way to discredit the Oera Linda, possibly, or they just latched onto it because of the way they interpreted it, or some other reason.
Right. And we get in. I just want to say, when we get closer and closer to the center of this wheel, there's less and less groups, but we're not ever really sure if there's only one group we're talking about. You know, I do know that there's forms of Norse runic that is like the forbidden stuff that, like, you know, it's like you don't go to that part of the prison kind of thing.
All right, I'm going to go more into the second part of the teachings. So it says, Finda's folk are a wicked folk, for although their pseudo-wise men convince themselves that they are divine beings, they have created false divinities for the uninitiated, everywhere proclaiming that these divinities have created the world with all that is therein, greedy divinities, full of envy and wrath, who demand to be honored and served by the people, who desire blood and sacrifice and demand rich offerings. But these vain, false men, who allow themselves to be called gods, servants, or priests, claim and collect and receive everything on behalf of divinities that do not exist, to keep it for themselves. They do all this with an easy conscience, as they imagine themselves divine and answer to no one. If there are any who see through their tricks and try to expose them, these are caught by their henchmen and burnt for their heresy, always with solemn ceremonies, in honor of their false divinities. But in truth, it is only to protect the priesthood. In order that our children may be armed against their idolatrous doctrines, the duty of the maidens is to make them learn by heart the following. When I hear the maidens referred to in this text, I am thinking the Sibyls, you know, or what precursor thing to the Sibyls there was, especially because of how concealed everything about the Sibyls seems to be. So the duty of the maidens is to make the children learn by heart the following. Wralda existed before all things, and after all things he shall endure. Wralda is thus eternal, and he is infinite. Therefore nothing exists outside of him. From Wralda's life sprang time and all things, and his life takes time and all things away. These facts must be made clear and manifest to all who are wise, so that they can explain and demonstrate it to others. Once that has been understood, say further. Regarding our physical dimension, we are thus part of Wralda's infinite being, as is the physical dimension of all creation. Yet, regarding our appearance, our characteristics, our mind, and our thoughts, these do not belong to the being. All these are fleeting phenomena that appear through Wralda's life, which appear as they are through his wisdom, and not otherwise. But because his life is perpetually progressing, nothing can remain stationary. Therefore, all creatures change in their position, their appearance, as well as their minds. Therefore, neither earth herself nor any creature may ever say, I am, but rather, I was. Likewise, no man may ever say, I think, but only I thought. The youth is larger and changed from when he was a child. He has other desires, passions, and ways of thinking. The man and father is and thinks differently from when he was a youth. The same applies to the elderly. Everyone knows this. Since everyone thus knows and must acknowledge that one is continuously changing, one must also acknowledge that one changes every instant. Also, whilst one says I am, and that one's thoughts change whilst one says I think. Thus, instead of unworthily imitating the loathsome Fendas and saying I am, or even I am the best part of Wralda, yea, through us alone can he think, we proclaim the following always and everywhere, that it needs to be said. We, Freya's children, are emergences through Wralda's life, in the beginning mean and bare, but always becoming and advancing towards perfection, without ever becoming as good as Wralda himself. Our mind is not Wralda's spirit, it is merely a semblance of it. When Wralda created us, he lent us, through his wisdom, a brain, senses, memory, and many good qualities. By means of these, we can consider his creations and his primordial Iwa laws. From these we can learn, and about them we can speak, all and only for our own benefit. If Wralda had not given us any senses, we would know nothing, and we would be yet more helpless than a jellyfish that is driven forth by the ebb and flow. So that's basically the
was that a jellyfish at the end? It was an afterbirth.
The
Did
last
we have
thing
a
is
jellyfish born at the end of all that as an afterbirth?
Yeah, buddy. That's the placenta. Mark it on the timestamp.
Wow, there was a lot of sacred ritual and observance in all of that. That was really something. Like, they're laying down a philosophy with, like, you know, just different terms. They're just using that, like they're describing the dialectic. I think that's another thing. They call it the Heideggerian dialectic, but this is just where it came from.
I'm really intrigued by what kind of like consciousness shift maybe would come about if we stopped, if we changed the way we spoke so that we weren't doing all this, I am this, I am that type of identification. I am happy, I am sad. Some languages already do that. They'll say, I am having sadness, or, sadness is on me, or happiness is on me, but they're not saying I am this. That if there's corruption of language in the mix with this conversation, it could very well be that part of what causes the downfall of a society in some kind of subtle way, as in the narrowing or corrupting of consciousness, it could be the structure of language and how people are trained to talk, because that's how they're trained to think. And, to me, that rings true, that we're not, as soon as you say, I am this, the next moment has already come. As soon as you say, I think this, the next thought has already come. It's never, we are not the like eternal present moment, eternal infinite thing that we are all sensing and feeling, that the life of nature, the life of God, or this Wralda, as it's called, is happening in front of us. We're in a dialogue with it of sorts, for sure. But it's obvious that life is bigger than any one person. It's obvious that there's a corruption in the idea of idols and worshiping deities that you need an intermediary for, and everything that comes about from the priesthood. Right. I really like that passage. So, a good religion or a good spirituality ought to be pretty much that simple and Spartan and like, minimal. Because then from there, people can draw their own understandings and wisdom out of it, as long as they know, like, okay, here's the boundaries of, like, if you go too far this direction, you're going to start getting crazy. Right. I like it. And thank you, Bob Sia, for that nice super chat. Bobcha. Thank you, Dylan, for the correction. Really nice super chat.
Yeah. I like Old World Micmac's comment here. I want to highlight, I am in French is je suis. And it's very significant that it's the I that you remove from that phrase that makes it into the Jesus, you know? And it's just something to ponder, like, you know, the concept of the object and the subject, and culturally it means different things in different continents, you know. And like when I was going through the symposium, they literally are talking about, wouldn't it be great if we could build an entire community of people who are like so interdependent on what other people think about them that they're just completely locked into this into a fortified brotherhood, and then they could be our warriors for us, and we'll put them out in the perimeter, and they'll do all the fighting, and we can live in the center. So they're literally describing the matematikoi, the profane, the uninitiated outer ring, being like so codependent mentally. But I think they're literally talking about manipulating their language so that their thoughts only work that way. And so when we look at the French, we're like, look at these assholes, look at these Gauls, look at how
Dude, that's how
pompous they are.
slavery works. You have to control the language of the slave.
Yes.
And it narrows their imagination.
Yeah. So
I didn't mean to
think,
stop you. I just wanted to be like, yeah, buddy.
I'm just kind of getting a hold of that. And like, I also, with that in mind, that like social engineering literally works our language and the way we think in maybe unproductive ways when we come together, unless you work hard at it. You know, you can always get better. But then I also want to put that next to, I've learned that there's a awesome theory, I think, that people who have multiple languages, when they're young, they are also developing other talents, and even to the extent that it registers as almost a different persona. And that is something that gets really weird and crazy. Some people can handle it. They got to be careful here. But having different languages does give you a very broad worldview. And you can start to see like, oh, you know, I don't know, the NATO and the Wotan of it all is like, you kind of got to see everything from both sides, you know, to get the full picture of what's being disclosed.
So someone in the chat a while back asked if we could address Nihilena or Nihilenia and Minerva and stuff. We'll address that with Jan, so stay tuned. But it does dovetail into something. Chance, I posted in our chat. I don't know if you see it. If you don't want to pull it up, don't, by all means. But it's important to all this stuff, because where I'm coming with, like, if you zoom in to the left, you'll see this. This symbol was used by Italians, ancient Italians and Greeks, long before anyone else. And now what I'm going to show you is a region where the Nega inscriptions in the Gova were found. And if you...
And this is in Sybaris?
That's India. Yeah, that's Italy. And so the reason this is significant is because all of the actual archaeological evidence shows this coming from the Mediterranean up. Now, can you pull me up real quick so people can see that just for a little bit? The Nega helmets that we've covered, they're found. Look, you see it. It's like basically at the border with Austria, Hungary. And for the longest time, they thought this was the proto-runic system. But you'll see it right there. I can read Etruscan. I can read this, right? That first letter is an H, but it's not even an Etruscan H. It's a freaking Phoenician H. Go look up what a Phoenician H looks like, right? They erroneously transliterate that sign, right? Kind of looks like, was it the Liebenrune or whatever? That is equivalent to the Greek CH. So Hitler even renamed this town after Harigas, right? H-A-R, that's an R-I. This is a C-H, Harikas. Not to be confused, because if it was supposed to be pronounced by a G, like a G, it would have been written in Etruscan like that or like that, right? Because the C and K and G interchange. Now, the reason this is significant...
What did he call the town?
Harigas.
It sounds like Hagia, like...
Yeah, I've sent this to you one day via text. And Harigas, right? And then T-E-I, that's the digamma, right? So it's like a V. Teva, which is basically Deva. And then there's three little slashes here that I don't know what it says. And this is allegedly an I and a P. But I can't make heads or tails of it without seeing it in person. But the point is the runes come from Clusium, which make their way up to the Venetian, the Rhaetic, which they're thinking now this is. And I'm telling you, everything in the record shows that it's coming from the south up. It's not coming from the north down. Even the urn culture, if you look up the status quo with urn culture, they'll try to tell you like, oh, it's evidence of culture coming downward from the north. Not in Italy. In Italy, urnfield culture goes from the south up. So how is that possible? Well, look at a map of Scandinavia, Britain, the Iberian Peninsula, and Italy, and the type of people bringing that, the Etrusco-Phoenicians, the maritime empire that we've been harping on. And the reason I want to bring this up is because just like with Minerva, someone's asking about Minerva, this is an Etruscan deity. So when you see it in this spelled Minera, V-R-A, that's Latinized. They wouldn't have spelled it like that. It would have been M-E-N, and we'll go into that, not to slow it down. It's M-E-N-R-V-A in Etruscan. So going back to what I said, playing this poker game where everybody's calling. The river has come. Put your final bets. If you're going to call, I'm calling, by the way, because I've got a monster hand. I'm calling. I want to see your cards. Where are the artifacts supporting this? Not only that, things would have had to change geographically so much. I don't know if people realize what surviving at 60 degrees north latitude in winter is like. I'm at 50 degrees north latitude. You do even one night in winter unprepared, you're not seeing daylight. You will freeze within hours. So these people were not inhabiting these regions as far back as this is claimed to be written year round. What were they doing? They were going there fishing at first, right? Until you develop the technology to survive in those harsh winters, like the clothing, like all that stuff, I'm not buying that this is coming from there. I'm not buying that the Finns are coming from even further north from some distant continent that was submerged, unless you can show, and this is the unless, if you can show that that was like more like, you know, the north was more like a tropical paradise 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Yeah. I'm all about it. I will get on board and will champion as hard as I am about this coming from the south up. But the runes come from Italy, specifically Etruscan, Etruria, Clusium. That's the city. I've written articles on it, and every serious scholar will admit this. And when you show me this and say it's proto runes, and I'm just looking at it, I'm like, well, there's Phoenician and it's Etruscan. And it, because it's got this he, that's late Etruscan. Like if you go, this will take two forms. You'll see it like this on the inscriptions, but you also see it like this. So if you go look up Karun, just like type this into like, it's the Greek Karun, but in Etruscan it's Karun. Look at it written in the wall. The CH will be, it'll look like this. So that's how I know it's that. It's not a G. You shouldn't be transliterating that as a G. Okay. And again, this is why language is so important. And this is why, in my opinion, I've spent so much time on it, because it is the death knell of whatever you can't get shit by somebody who knows what he's looking at. Yeah. And man, I just wanted to bring that up.
You gotta pose the question too, though, in terms of the North and the climate question. We don't have a clue because no one's allowed to go to the North Pole. You know, we don't know the answer to that question.
Dude, you can go to fucking Norway.
You can go to
They're
Norway.
Not surviving winter at 60 degrees plus north latitude in clothing from 600 BC. You're just not.
No, it would take some pretty amazing clothing to survive it without shelter structures.
Unless people can bring forth. Listen, if you can bring forth evidence of clothing, I'm game.
I got something. It's not evidence. This is as ethereal as it gets. But I will say this. You know, a lot of the culture. I'm so Greek centric in my research. So just forgive me that this is totally Greece, which is like not north, right? It's down south, about 37-degree parallel. But I do want to make this note, because it's kind of been echoing in my head as I go through the 9 muses of the Enneagram. Down at the bottom, between the 2 muses of theater, There's the comedy, it comes first, and then comes tragedy is the second muse.
Sorry, I'm interrupting your flow.
It's all good. It's all good.
We need the receipts on that. If you can find that, Cody, that would be awesome to put into the chat.
Yeah.
Proof of tropical coral in Alaska.
See, yeah. See, I love stuff like that. Yeah, those kind of artifacts. Well, my point was that comedy, her dress code is kind of scanty. She corresponds with Aphrodite, who wears a thin nightie. And their footwear was very like almost a sock. It was barely noticeable. But then there's a transfer over when we go to tragedy to the number 5 position. That muse is Melpomene, pronounced other ways. She has boots. She's the first one to have like hardcore treadwear, and one of her nicknames is She of the Sumptuous Dress. And so it seems to imply an evolution from the good old days of comedy where it was all fun and love. Something happened. A tragedy struck, the grand scarring of whatever. And now we need more clothing, we need durable footwear, and we need to incorporate tragedy into people's worldview so they don't fall apart when marauders come. So they actually have forbearance, and they can understand that tragedy is something that we can get through with a little bit of cultural guidance.
Done. So in terms of I still want to see the old newspapers recording proof of tropical coral in Alaska, or where there may be better proof than that. But this is hilarious comment, Dylan. Old newspapers are like using tweets or Instagram posts as evidence.
Well, I did that because there was this episode that Longo did with that archivist guy or whatever, and they tried to use old newspaper claims of the Uralic, the Ergo-Finnic languages being the key to deciphering Etruscan languages. And just because a newspaper article made that claim in 1915 doesn't mean anyone actually demonstrated it, because when you look into the book that Jules Martha, the professor, wrote, and I did a whole article on this, it's on my Substack. Please go look at it, everyone. It's amazing. There is nobody ever demonstrated that the roots and terminations and the structure of Etruscan has any affinity to Finnish or the Uralic Finnish from like Finns from Russia, right? Nobody ever demonstrated that. But I did show you how close to Hungary that artifact was allegedly dug up, right? How close to, I think it's weird. It's almost like people don't realize how big, like you guys realize that most of the known Western world was Italy, right? Like you've seen maps of the Roman Empire, correct? They didn't just like go in there and leave everybody's, culture up and say, oh, just pay your tithes and we'll go away. No, we went over there, built fucking cities. Look at Anatolia, look at Turkey. Look at all the fucking Roman cities still there. Some of the best ruins. This whole world, and this is what I'm saying, if you could just expand your idea of what Italy was, it was massive. North Africa, everywhere, from all the way to Asia Minor. But this is inheriting the old system prior to that. And that is what I do agree with, like a lot of these researchers, where they're saying something's not adding up with the history of the Roman Empire. And I think it's because that, whatever that is covering up the Phoenician Etruscan. And that's why you know nothing about Etruria. You have the most important cities in the world regarding statues, metallurgy, everything, that pottery, and no Roman or Greek writers write about it. Like literally, that is the cover up. That's what I'm trying. And so, as much as I love a lot of these people,
they just get this label. The Bronze Age is this label that gets put on things, right. But man, the stuff that the artifacts from the Bronze Age is how do you even get bronze? You need tin and copper. Gotta have.
Oera Linda writes about Britain and the slaves getting sent to the tin mines.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the elements of it. That's like, okay, there's truth ringing in that for sure.
But the problem with it is, in the Oera Linda, Britain is spelled like this. That's Latin. When this shit would have been written, this was not a name. It was
So-
either the Bratanak.
Play devil's
Right.
advocate. It could be a symptom of the recopying and retranscribing it, and that whoever does that at different intervals throughout the passage of this text forward in whatever family maybe rewrites it in a way that they think their grandchildren will be able to read and understand, and not, you know, the way that it was in the last draft. You know, it's like updates. That could be just throwing that out there as a possibility.
Maybe.
Right.
But
also-
the thing is if you're going to pass this off as history, I have a hard time, because this would have been Bratanak Phoenician. It would have been Cassater in Celtic, which the Greeks, Cassateros, they added their OS termination, right?
Yeah.
And that's what became the Cassaterides, the islands of tin. But this meant the 10 islands.
Yes.
So the fact that you would neglect that, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of stuff in this that is not acknowledging. That's where my skepticism is coming from, of it being authentic, is because it's not acknowledging older cultures doing this stuff.
Yeah. I got to point out the Tanakh at the end of Britannic, right? And also this, you know, the sacred 10 laws. That's even continued in the Constitution. The Bill of Rights was 10, was a commandments, 10 commandments. C is a 100. So it actually corresponds to the 10 again. So commandments, amendments, you just put the 10 in, it becomes the C, right? Overlooker, the watcher over, which is the maze. The centaur creates the maze. But
The century of God, the 100 soldiers of God, you know?
Linda is an anagram for Latin. Nice one, Micmac.
oh, right. Okay. Yes. Micmac. Big up.
No, and
Big up
no. So
Micmac.
John addressed this, and his claim is that no, this whole Latin forgery, this whole Latin corruption, what they did is he said his claim is that Latin is actually a corruption of the Frisian language. So I'm all about that. I'll buy that I'll buy that every day of the week if people can start demonstrating it. You know, that's literally like my thing is. There's all these cool claims that
into a real world artifact or several.
I'll put it in this book. This book is not done yet, but if you can drop the hardcore gravy on that, I'm all about it. But when it comes time to produce evidence, people aren't producing evidence, and that's where my frustration is coming from, because I want to get on board with you guys, but it's just not there.
So I'm going to, something that I've kind of picked up on, and I think other people could probably speak on this way better than I can, but I just want to point out that, like, we've spoken last time about how the Sibylline oracles brought to Cumae just some of the cream of the crop writings, and we just get, allegedly 3 books, and that they expand on that, and then and it's probably all sensationalism from there. But that Cumae is a very important location. I think it's actually seated in the word alcume myself, but I think that the art craft of how do I say this? It's insurance essentially, but it's burial rights. They learned the vulnerability of the Greeks was in their burial rights. And if you can capture everything that has to do with honoring the ancestors, then you can create an entire empire out of being rotten. You can be rotten. And this is the Latin of the Latin. That is the rot that the Pythias sat on top of. And at some point, and this is also one of the first pharaohs ever in biblical mythos, is that one of the first pharaohs had learned that you could charge people money while they were still alive and hold it over their head how close they were going to get to the Holy of Holies in their burial plot. Yes. Yeah, man. Yes. And another thing is that when I studied the language of Latin, it is so cryptorific. It can anagrams very, very easily. And remember,
isn't it wild how there's no structure to it? Like you can literally put the words up and you're still correct, but that was their way of emphasizing stuff.
Yes. So if you play with this, and it is dangerous, I will say, do this. This is not admissible in court. But get on the Google Translate and play with Latin words and watch the phrases expand, and then go back in and put spaces in between the sounds, and you'll see the sentence take this. It's alive. And so there's something strangely zombie-like about this dead rotten language. It is very amorphous in a way that is different from the Greeks. It has a life that is different from what the Greeks are, which I'm still not quite there. But something about the Latin, when you play with it, it's like they are punning in the way that the language is structured. And it does really fascinating things. So you can do a lot of wild wordplay. They're so cryptographic.
And you know who would be a great guest if you get on his show? Because he's like one of the few like Tartaria type of like mud flood, like just an overall some sort of event happened, and he's really good. Is Conspiracies Are Us. If you could get him on, or Conspiracy Are Us, I can't remember what it is, but he's a really great channel. But he was talking about he was saying something about like the Latin, and I just lost my train of thought trying to shout him out. I just didn't want to hijack his idea. But essentially, like, there could be something to the Latin and all this stuff being just like a totally modern construct that was invented by the church to cover up the priest.
Jan Ott also is into the chronology idea that you know, like 800 or 1,000 years were tacked on. That when you see 300, it's actually, or you see 1300, it's really 300, or vice versa.
I remember what I was
things of the 2,000 years ago are a lot closer to us in history than we think, or than we're told. There's
an institute. There's an institute in, I think it's Sweden. It's one of the Scandinavian countries, I think, that has literally archived, like mapped out every Latin inscription that's ever been found. And they're found the majority on the outskirts of the empire, not in Italy. And I thought that was interesting. Yeah, look him up, man. It's one of his last videos, Conspiracy Are Us. If I can think of it while you guys are talking, I'll go look it up and post it in the chat. It's really good. He'd be a great guest, man.
Yeah, that is so interesting, because we're at a point right now where the imperial expansionism has gone as far as it could possibly. It can't go expand anymore, and now they're turning it inward to collapse back into the center, and that's an old dynamic. That's really something that the exterior ring speaks the more militarized code. You know, just like I was saying about in the symposium, they're like, wouldn't it be nice if the outer ring were a bunch of ignorant troops who lived in tropes, you know, who did whatever we said because they were hero worshipers. We just put out a theatrical production and they obey. Real quick, before we move too far away, I was going back through the Odyssey, and I'm seeing that I think the Odyssey might be a fictional reaccounting of actual wartime events. I see like Olympus. I'm always putting Olympus in Spain, actually, as like there's something missing from the Moorish Muslim aspect of the Spanish history that we're not getting. But I'm seeing them as very much like Olympus, and the story of Ulysses' journey being so similar to the Spanish Armada. In the Spanish Armada, wandering all over the UK, having storms and all kinds of tragedy along the way. But it's almost like the story of Ulysses is correspondent with the Spanish Armada, and then Zeus is up on Olympus, where all the gods are falling apart because of the war and the fallout, and it's like just correspondent with the fall of Spain. And it just fascinates me how like we're talking about missing time. Well, this mythology seems to echo strongly in that time frame when the Spanish Armada was sunk and the Tempest was made. That's when John Dee allegedly made the Tempest sink the Spanish Armada forever. So this makes the Spain becomes like let me think of this. They become like the Greeks in a strange way, and then up north they become Troy. The UK, the UK becomes Troy in a strange way. I don't know. It's just fascinating how these echoes seem to fit, and they're better preserved in history. You know, because the Odyssey is entertaining. If you read Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War, it's like dry, so it's not going to preserve for everybody.
Whew. This has been interesting.
Keep it going. Keep it going.
You guys, you know,
Or is it time to wrap up?
I think I want to wrap up. I'm only halfway through this set of slides, but I feel that it would be more interesting. Like, this is actually not a bad spot to pick it up from next time, because it'll kind of incur a little review. And then, so I do really want to go further on the Oera Linda. We might do it several times, kind of like we have that series going with the astro herbalism. So if you guys are game, we'll pick it up on the other side.
That's actually, I'm reluctantly, that's like the focus of my work right now, is just going through this, because I want to make sure I'm going to address this in a book, right? Like, I have to, because if it's true, and if there is truth there, I want to latch onto it, because if it is true, then the majority of my work I would have to tweak, you know, right? It doesn't discredit any of the work that I've done, but I would have to adapt. So I want to make sure when I put this out that I've got it right.
Yeah, and I know you guys love 4-hour marathon streams, but keeping the streams closer to 2 hours is a better thing to shoot for, to get people to actually watch it. I know.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were already going for 2 hours.
We were at 2 hours. This is great. This is great, and this is, you know, I'll be able to more closely comb through the post-flood history that's given in the Oera Linda, and that's what we'll pick up on next time. We'll talk more about the triple goddess, Lydia, Freya, and Finda. So it's going to be interesting. We'll definitely continue on this, and awesome to have you guys all here.
Shout out to Julian. Julian super chatted you. The Yule feast of Julian.
I got to send Gabe 11,111 won. That was a super chat to Gabe for Gabe. So you get yourself a Cash App or something, start letting me put that in the description of videos, and people can send you money. Yeah. A smart business person once said, make it as easy as possible for people to give you money. And lots of people out there want to give you money. Someone just tried to right here. So I think that's like $8 or $9 USD. I got you. You just give me the way to send it. I got you. And loved this conversation so far. You guys bring so much to the table. Happy for closing thoughts. There's plenty of space for that. We're just making our way towards the goalpost.
I'm realizing, buddy, you know, this solar image, I just want to put it in everybody's consciousness. Your conch shows. Is this the tambourine? Is this the tympania? Is this the eardrum? There's a strange, beautiful thing about the fact that temp is time, and it's but it's also it's a part of music. It's musical as well. It's not just strictly visual. So part of the thing with the punning is like, it's also auditory. So yeah, I kind of have I have it in my mind that this is also a cymatic impression of what the tympania of the tambourine is making, and that the difference in meter with some of the poetry and the sacred texts is probably a really important signature. So I'm kind of putting this into a more musical format in my mind, and I just think it's great because it matches your shirt so well, Chance. Right?
Oh yeah, I designed this logo for Interverse so long ago. I knew nothing about the system or about solar symbolism. I was just like, that looks cool. And every once in a while I get hilarious comments like, your symbol for your show is obvious that you're part of the Illuminati and you're quite evil. It's like, all right.
Well, that's why I addressed the 33, because it's like, I don't want.
No, it's like it's kind of useful to put the boogeyman stuff on your cover, because it will chase away the people who are not ready to address the truth, because they're so caught up in like victimhood that they're like, oh, Masons are everywhere. They're trying to hurt me.
How appropriate is that logo to this? Because you have the Oera Linda in the circle, those standing runes in the circle, and then you have the Hebrew whatever from the hexagram. It's the same. You're seeing it right there. You're seeing it all right there.
Gabe, we're getting more super chats that are for you. I guess they don't love me. All the work I put in, poor me. Just kidding. We want to support you. So we'll talk about that on screen.
Let me play everybody a song.
The whole different chronology thing, I think Plato and the Greek philosophers, there could be a thread to pull on that stuff is, you know, fabricated and invented more, or at least as much as what you know, the Oera Linda allegedly would be.
Yeah,
and Rachel is
Herodotus
too. Oh my gosh, she's paid us all a nice 20 euros tonight. Thank you, Rachel. You're such a good lady. We're all
the thing is, though, with the shit you're talking about, that's what the status quo is putting forth, and then we're debunking it as astrotheology. So we're addressing it, you know what I mean? And so now we're addressing it at our own side, right? So like what this shows with the Oera Linda is, because for me, like I personally gravitate to Norse culture more than I like the people more. I get along better with the people. I like their like I like everything about Norse culture pretty much, except for how docile they've gotten over the last, you know, couple centuries. One of my good friends is from Sweden and stuff. And so I've gotten a privy to what's going on there. But what we're doing is we're showing that we are not unwilling to shine our light or our focus on our own side. It's not, we don't have an agenda here. So if there was a side that we have, it would probably be with the Oera Linda people, right? Because like the tenets, the ideology put forth are very, like, you know how Gabe, you were saying, like it's
all freedom and
individualism, like, yeah. So we tend to identify with that. That's why I'm doing this, right? And I'm showing people, I'm seeing the same problems in the Oera Linda that I see with Herodotus, or, you know, anything else that I've addressed ad nauseum.
Yeah. You know, that is kind of the strange thing. One of my pet peeves in people is when they negate their own words too quickly. Then you end up not really getting anywhere. I find that a pattern of that in myself, but that's kind of something about that Enneagram in that loyalist number 6 position. It's like these people are looking for community and coming together. That is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but it's just good to know what your enemy knows about it as well. But the shadow side of that number 6 is the people who are know fear, like deeply know fear, like the fear of God. It's a fucking gift. It's such a gift. So there is a shadow side of the loyalist, and that is part of what your filter is, Chance, with that 33. It's like, look, if you people are like, oh, there's no such thing as a boogeyman, then you go live in your 15-minute city. You know, you don't belong here because you don't have the fear of God. You don't know that there is a dark side to the Enneagram. That's literally where Luke Skywalker has to go to fight himself, you know? So those people, those castaways, those who had to go through the Exodus into the domain of Hecate and the unknown, and this crazy spoked wheel where math where it's a different based system, let's say. Those people have rigor. You know, they have perseverance. My favorite fucking word, perseverance. And those are Spartan characteristics.
Ooh, Rachel Sparks.
Yeah.
She's flirting with me. Chance gets all of it. You already subscribed to my Substack. I don't need anything. God provides. Appreciate it, though. Chance has everything that goes to me. This is his platform. When Gabe wants us to come do this on his platform, we'll go do it on his platform. When I want them, you know, that's the way cookie crumbles, guys.
Yeah. So yeah,
Man, I didn't think about Hecate's wheel though. You just brought that up. I'm going to bring up the image of Hecate's wheel. It's just I don't know how old this symbol is, but it's allegedly an ancient Greek symbol for Hecate, and is now currently a Wiccan symbol. There's definitely some similarity. I just coined a new word, similarity between these.
Oh, dude, what's Hecate? Remember there was like a word you sent me. It's like Hakato or something.
It's like 100. I think it means like 100.
Yeah, it means a century. But then look, her root is right there. It's also the X and the X. The S
right. And X. Nice.
Yeah, Hekato is 100 in Greek. I just learned that while learning Greek this year.
Right.
Hekato. So it's not exactly Hecate, but it is phonetically. It's like Hekato, Hecate. It's got, you know, the consonant sync up really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got this 6-spoke thing going on. It's very.
You know, that would be
that's Pinterest.
So 10. So XX. That's 2 X's. That's 10 times 10 becomes 100. Right there. So the two X's becomes Hecate, twice X, right? 10 times 10 is 100. But the mythology is that her consciousness comes back every 100 years. And I mean, in a nutshell, I mean a super nutshell, I'm so overgeneralizing. I think that this Hecate's wheel is what Sigmund Freud was sussing out with his Oedipus complex and this collapsing of the family, cannibalizing itself and turning a blind eye on the inevitable pressures of society, such that you go climbing up the ladder, trying to improve the realm, and you find out that your own family and your own roots were the enemy. You know, it's a dark story. It's so uncomfortable and weird, but I think it happens every 100 years. I think it's on the Hecate cycle. And I think Sigmund Freud had a real good sense of that way back in his day. And so the Oedipus thing and the Hecate cycle is freak-tastic, but it's not going away. I'll say that.
Well, in the center, it had that Triskelion or Trescale symbolism. You know, the three legs, or the triquetra, whatever, with the Celtic.
Nice. I love that way to say it. Yeah, the Isle of Man and Sicily.
Yes,
originally Sicily. Originally,
talk about fucking cultural diffusion. I've got a post coming up on that, Gabe, because you made me look into the sheep. Remember when we were talking about the fucking Knum and the Manx sheep? So I started looking deep into that Manx, and I'm like, what the fuck is on their flag? What the fuck is on this coin? What the fuck? How is this nobody talking about this cultural diffusion?
It's profound. Yeah, the all things in the Isle of Man were seeded into the new Star Wars, which I don't even enjoy, but it's all there. The chasing of the Ren ritual, Kylo Ren and Rey, that's a Raven and a Ren. It's all Welsh-tastic. All right, I know you want to go, Chance.
Get it going. Sorry.
No, it's good. I mean, you guys just need like your own place to just air out ideas. Oh wait, you have it. It's vibrant. Sorry for cutting you off. Last thing I'll say too is everyone, congratulations to India for landing on the moon today. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it's obviously super real. It doesn't look fake at all.
Space is real and Earth is a globe. Please promote us, YouTube. Earth is a globe.
Congrats, India.
Chance, will you do me one favor, one awesome kindness, please? Will you pull up the vulture one that I sent you in our personal telly? Because that's a good one. That's coming up for the whole week. We're on Vulcanalia. Happy Vulcanalia, everybody. It's the day of the volcano. It's the day Vesuvius erupted and the Krakatoa erupted and left 7 circles around something, which is the 7 rivers of the river Styx. So yeah, today's the volcano holiday, and it goes for 3 days. It's overnight, and then it is concluded with 3 more days of the Vulcanalia. And we are officially crisscrossing the Analima throughout this entire week. And so it is the volcano holiday, and the volcano is the powerful correspondence to the moon card, which is Hawaii. And so those events taking place in Hawaii are Voci Gituria, victory.
That's a city. Voci. It's a city in Etruria. It's one of those ones that the Romans and Greeks don't write about.
Interesting, because people are kind of weird about vultures, right? Like they're birds of omen. They're ominous birds. They're literally ominous. There's no more ominous of a bird. So right now there's going to be people talking about vulture capitalism. Well, this is literally what happens when the X of the Analima descends to cross.
That's what that song by your buddy Logan is about.
What's that?
The Richmond and Richmond or whatever. That's vulture capitalism. It's like, right, priming people for Vulcanalia.
This is all a ritual. This is such a ritual, all of it. So So this is vulture capitalism. And what? There's one more thing. Oh, and it's also, here's the thing. It's the 10. This is completion. This is completion. This is the crossing of the X.
The Hawaii land grab ties into this. I see that in your graphic. Okay.
Yes.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture.
Yes. And Vulturnus is also a lake in Antarctica, which is very fascinating to me that it has that, and that down under, that plus ultra kind of more beyond, kind of historical tie-in. And, but also so 3 days of the volcano, then 3 days of Vulcanalia, which is called vulture, but it's in commemoration to a river god, the Tiber River, Dylan.
Yeah.
Right. But this whole thing is tying a bow. This is tying the bear all together. It puts all the ribs of the bow into one nice little package here. So in a crazy way, this ritual makes real dark sense. This is torturous, literally.
Old World Micmac. Yeah. Old World Micmac just brought up turkey vultures, and I'm not kidding you guys. I've seen one of them from far away. They're massive, like on the side of the road eating a deer carcass. And when I first saw it, I got like the fear of like the underworld. It looked like a fucking black wraith. The way it's like feathers were moving as it was feasting, and they're so big on top of a deer. I'd never seen anything like this. And for a brief moment before I realized what it was like something from the netherworld had popped up and was like,
they have that red head, like their head is all like blood red.
And you know what?
They're gnarly.
Greece is on fire. There were fires in Greece today, which is where the temple to Hades is on the 37 degree fire. Another Greece fire. So when you said that it came up from the underworld, it totally made me think of the temple to Hades, where they used to throw birds into the fumes as a sacrifice. But Chance, we're keeping you up all night here.
No, it's okay. Did you know that the turkey vulture is more related to the stork than it is to other birds of prey?
Very interesting. That's the storgy, that fraternal love. Definitely, makes me think of the Hermanos and the Spartans.
And the Palazios.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going for. Like elbow and Dylan, like the Pelasgi, that's the Phoenician symbol.
The Pelagi, that's the Holy Sailors. I got a book titled that. That's why.
That's right. Which
we already brought that up in the slides earlier with the Wralda breathing or giving the odd or the reproductive power to the triple goddess or the three sisters.
Right.
And that odd word is connected to a word referring to the stork.
Right. And let's not forget,
according to Jan Ott.
Pelasgi, placenta, magenta, Valis, all related.
Drop the mic. We're out.
All right.
Good night.
Fuck you, Benjamin Franklin and Carl Jung.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one. Make sure you're following Slick Dissident on YouTube. Dylan's Substack will be linked.
I put everything in the chat already. You're good.
It's in the show description too. If you're not catching this live, hit me up for tuning. Got some space in September to do some tuning. Been having great miraculous experiences. You're ready. All right. Good night, everybody. Love y'all. Thanks for supporting. Thanks for tuning in. See you on the next one. We will continue the Oera Linda soon. Peace.